So it's not for kids.
I listened to the previous episodes of the podcast and I thought I'd do my required reading before coming on here. And so last night I tried in vain to watch the Minecraft movie.
Oh, no.
A Minecraft movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I couldn't find it on any of the services that I have access to except for Amazon, where it was like 18 British pounds. And I thought that's
That's
worth it.
Not worth it.
Okay, well, that's good.
In the US, it's on Max.
Okay.
I don't know if that's the same. I know that localized approvals or whatever, like authorization to stream, is different from service to service.
I'm on like a friend's media server thing, and he just like uploads basically anything that comes out,
okay.
It's on there. And I was like really astounded to find that a Minecraft movie wasn't even on there.
It's not on the radar. Your friend was like, this is not worth uploading.
It's not even worth thinking about. That's where it was. So I'm really sorry that I failed in that. I tried my best, but I didn't watch it.
We're going to try to navigate without your knowledge of the Minecraft movie. I think we'll be able to make it through the episode. We'll see.
Yeah. Giving us just a little bit of a challenge, which is good because as podcasters, we're honestly not challenged enough.
Yeah.
All right. I have a very important point of discussion that we need to clarify right now, because otherwise it's going to drive me crazy because it's already been kind of difficult.
Okay.
How do we refer to the two of you?
When I was at school, people would just call me Brewster. Everyone would call me that.
Brewster.
I didn't have a first name.
Well, would that be traumatic for you now?
Yeah, maybe that would really send me back in a way that would be uncomfortable.
I could become Bowers for the day because that doesn't weirdly.
That's a good one. Like I think that's a good mononym, Bowers.
Or we can do it. So I'm going to restrain myself from making British jokes, British references, anything like that. Earlier we said Tuesday. I really wanted to say Tuesday.
Tuesday.
You know, I know that's like it's all going to be very uncool. Kind of it's overplayed because I watch a lot of Taskmaster.
Taskmaster.
Taskmaster. Yeah,
Taskmaster with Greg Davies. Yeah, I do. It's sick. It's great TV.
Have you ever watched I think it's the New Zealand Taskmaster. Maybe it's the Australian one. There's one that has two Toms.
Two Toms as in like the hosts are Toms?
The Taskmaster is Tom and the assistant is Tom.
So how do they refer to the two Toms then?
So they have Lesser Tom.
Lesser Tom.
And Tom, I think. They've got Tom Gleason and Tom Cashman. That's what it is. And I'm pretty sure it's Australia.
I don't know which one of those is the Taskmaster and which of them isn't. I'm going to say, what are the two? Gleason
is the Taskmaster and Cashman is the assistant.
See, now I know, and I was going to think about which guess? I kind of identified the most with as a name, and then I would take the corresponding epithet based on which one of them I picked. So for this pod, if I identified more with Cashman, then for this pod, you could refer to me as Cashman.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, I'm okay with just referring to Tom Bowers as Lesser Tom, too.
Yeah, that just fits. The other thing I was going to say is crazy because we both have the same first initial on the last name.
Yeah, that was driving me nuts because I was writing Tom B to specify Tom Brewster, and that didn't help.
You could call me by my graffiti artist name, the Tomb Rewster. That's what I would call myself if I was a graffiti guy. If I had a tag,
Tomb Rewster.
All right.
I'm so cool.
All right, it's official. It's official. We got Lesser Tom and the Tomb Rewster.
But I was going to avoid playing into the sort of we're Americans, we do this, you guys are British, you do that, because I've been watching Series 19 of Taskmaster, and they have an American for I think, not the first time, but this is the first time where he's an American that lives in America.
Who is it that's on there?
Jason Mantzoukas.
He's not doing as good, to be honest.
I don't know if I'm sensitive to it because I'm an American and I feel like he's our standard bearer, but he's kind of embarrassing me.
Oh no!
Vicariously.
Like to be clear, he's very funny and he's enjoyable, but he's just being so American. He's like so loud and so obnoxious, and it's like, come on.
His shtick is like, I'm going to flip over the table at the end of every task.
Right. So he's like it's a bit pick me behavior.
Yeah, pick me American style for sure. I wonder, that's what I was going to wonder though, is that like if British audience members are like, this guy's great because like they love this stereotype. You know what I mean?
I've seen a lot of people being like that they like love him on New Taskmaster, but like that's because like the Taskmaster subreddit gets like shown to me all the time, despite me like not having watched the show in like quite a long time. It's that, and were you like on Reddit like loves just serving me awful subreddits. It served me the Last of Us TV show subreddit. I haven't played either of the games and I've never watched the TV show, and the subreddit just seemed to be like a hate subreddit for everything the show stood for, and I was being like waterboarded by it daily. It sucked.
Oh, you're gonna love this. Check this out. I know you don't know any of the story, but
that's what it really wanted me to engage with, and it maybe it was trying to get me away from looking at the board game subreddit, where every day it's like, what happened to Shut Up and Sit Down? I hate everyone on it now, and I want to die. That's like the predominant Reddit
Quins?
post.
We haven't seen Quins.
Where's that
When's
guy?
Quins coming back?
Where's that guy? Oh boy, they love it on there.
Tom, did you want to ask your question about?
Yeah, so we wanted to hear from you how are we meant to pronounce the subtitles of the two new Brass games?
You say Brass Birmingham, or you can say Brass Brum, because people call it Brum.
Brass Brum.
There was a kids' TV show called Brum where there was like a little car that drove around Birmingham. He was sick as fuck, dude. He was cool.
So if we're really in the know, it's Brass Brum now, okay?
And then there's Brass Lancashire. But what did you call it? Lancashire?
I think so. I think I did the
Lancashire.
whole Shire.
I lean into the A too. Lancashire.
It's Lancashire, not Lancashire or Lancashire. Lancashire.
Lancashire. I think.
Lancashire.
Now I'm doubting myself. Because you say Lancaster or Lancaster, depending on where you're from in the UK. If you're in the north, you'd say Lancashire. If you're in the south, you'd say Lancashire. I don't know. I don't know anymore. I've not played Brass Lancashire, so I don't know.
You've not played it?
I've not. And you were like really glazing it on one of your podcasts. You were like,
that's true.
Oh, yeah. The people who play Brass Birmingham are like pigs in slot, and Lancashire's for the real game brainers. You know, you said something like that.
We're just contrarians, and like we needed to reconcile that we liked a game that other people like, and so we're like, oh well, we like this version.
We like the better version. You're naysayers. Yeah. That's fine. I like
we
naysaying.
Justify everything on this show as a take of a higher intelligence than the average board game player.
It's a brain expanding podcast.
To be fair, you have to have a very high IQ to play Brass Lancashire.
This was my one comment that I was going to make about the Shelf Stable podcast before coming on, is I have a theory, which I think that this is the only true cool board game podcast. I think that's my take, because there's a kind of
that's high praise.
I can't remember what it was, but there was like a segment where you ended the segment by being like, I don't know, man, it's just fun. And then both of you just laughed. And I was like, yeah, these guys know what they're talking about. It's like the podcast equivalent of like overhearing the two guys who didn't like go to bed at the house party. They just kind of stayed up chatting about like whatever. That's the energy that the Shelf Stable podcast brings to the world. I mean,
that's where it came from. Like, our game group can speak to it. We used to do this anyway. We just started hitting record.
That's good. And that's the right kind of podcast.
We should start recording after 1 a.m. to get the full vibe.
Get the full vibe, yeah. So, Tomb Brewster.
Yes.
Tell us about yourself for those who don't know you.
I am one of the hosts of a board game YouTube channel called Shut Up and Sit Down. We make videos about board games that are okay. No, they're good. I'll say they're good.
I'd say they're pretty good.
And we have a podcast and we have a newsletter. And those are the main things that we make in the world. We talk about board games. We try and get new people into board games. I always say this. I got into the show. I got into board games by watching Shut Up and Sit Down. So it's kind of weird to do it now as a guy on Shut Up and Sit Down.
Well, yeah, you're kind of the first generation of Shut Up and Sit Down that consumed it prior to coming on. So it's interesting to have your angle.
Yeah, it's weird, but it's fun.
As an entity, Shut Up and Sit Down is kind of an OG, isn't it? You as a channel, it's been around for a long time.
Yeah,
it's shelf stable
for
and
ages.
half.
Yeah, truly. Yeah, it has. It's been around for a long old time, and it's funny, like going back and looking at like reappraising older games that the site had covered at one point and then kind of like rushed by. Like we'll probably talk about it later on, but like I've been playing a bunch of Innovation recently, and the Shut Up and Sit Down review of Innovation is like, it's a text review from like 2012, and Quinn's is like, yeah, it's good, but I wouldn't recommend it because there's just more like innovative stuff out there than this old box. It's like, what? It's such a deranged review, but like I think that when the site started, it kind of felt like they were like, obviously the board game hobby in force was around a lot longer than Shut Up and Sit Down, but like it definitely felt like a site that was kind of like showing a lot of people a new hobby that they hadn't really considered before. That's certainly what happened with me. I like had played some board games with my family, but nothing crazy. And then suddenly, oh my goodness, there's just a million games out there. Early on in the site's development, they had a huge reservoir of great games to like dip back in time into.
Yeah, it was a really good back catalog.
Yeah, exactly. Like they had so many things to cover that people were like, oh yeah, have you played this old game from a while back? And they'd be like, no. And they'd play it and then they'd review it. Whereas that's obviously still the case now. Like I still get shown like great old games that surprise me and delight me and I want to cover, but there's less of that ability to like dip back in time and like catch people up on however many years of board games that have existed, especially when you have to, nowadays we have to take into account whether there's stock of a game and stuff like that, because the audience is real sad when something isn't available.
Welcome to Shelf Stable, a podcast celebrating board games that have stood the test of time. I'm your first host, Kenny Katayama.
And I'm your lesser host, Tom Bowers. Today, the feature topic is iteration and innovation. This was chosen by none other than the special guest we have today, Tom Brewster. But before we get into some of those details, we want to talk about some of the things we've been playing. And before we talk about that even, I think Kenny has a couple surprises lined up for us.
Yeah, we have to know, Tom Brewster. So I know you're pretty excited for this part. So we're going to jump right into it.
I'm intrigued. I'm so intrigued.
Yoshi's Island on the GBA. What do you have to say about Yoshi's Island?
It's like the first game I remember playing on a flight, I think. My dad got me a Game Boy Advance with Yoshi's Island on it, and it was sick.
Did you get into video games or board gaming first?
Video games.
Was that kind of your first foray?
I was a small person.
Do you remember the first board game that got you really into things?
The first one I remember was this Dungeons and Dragons like adventure board game that had these like big chunky plastic figures, and you were like a party of adventurers going down fighting monsters in a dungeon, and it had bugbears, it had gnolls, it had all sorts of things. I remember a family friend losing his mind at the relentless Bolas. For some reason, he found that sequence of words to be the funniest thing he'd ever seen in his life.
It is a funny sequence of words.
It is. I think at 7 years old or thereabouts, I didn't entirely understand what he was talking about. I remember that very vividly, and I also remember having huge envy that there was another Tom in my class at school who had the same board game, but he had an expansion for it where you could like put a little hat on one of the miniatures, and I just thought it was incredible.
That's like pretty early on to have those like little cosmetic treatments. So that's kind of cool.
I know. It was the first board game expansion that I had access to, I guess.
That's not the fantasy adventure board game.
Dungeons and Dragons. The fantasy adventure board game. Oh, yeah, it is.
There you go.
Wow. Look at that cover. That's incredible. They really don't make them like they used to.
It's got that 90s sort of Dragon's Lair art style, I'd say. It looks like it could be the cover to a Don Bluth film.
Yeah. I haven't seen this game. Like, this is incredible. I actually haven't seen this game in like years and years. And so looking at like the pictures that people uploaded to it on Board Game Geek is like very surreal. Like, these pictures were uploaded in like 2010.
It's like a dream that you thought was just in your head, but it actually exists kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. Redgar, human fighter. Miley, elven wizard. Hell yeah. This is the good stuff. This is what they board games shouldn't have progressed past this point, in my opinion.
That was the peak.
That was the peak. It had little trees and little pillars, and there were slimes, and there were dice. And you know what? That's all you need. And you could make your own dungeons. Oh, wow.
Those dice look fucking awesome. Like,
they do, don't they?
They don't make them like that very much.
They don't make them like they used to. Maybe we should review this for the site. Maybe this should
be going to be the next post.
This will be the next hot thing that everyone's trying to get. They're like, oh, why can't I get copies of Dungeons & Dragons, the fantasy adventure board game from 2003?
Every time Shut Up and Sit Down posts something, instantly like goes up in the hotness. So it would be kind of fun as an experiment to just like pick something like completely unattainable and just have it shoot up.
Pick something completely arbitrary. I feel like the audience broadly is like good enough. Like they have their own brain. they can definitely identify when we like miss on something. Like, there was something really, really heartening about the fact that when we covered Dune Imperium, we covered it during the pandemic. Matt really liked it. I did not like it that much. Neither did Quint and Ava. We were all kind of like we were not in favor of it. The comments on that podcast is like everyone just being like, you are so wrong about this one. Like, they're all just like, you're going to look back on this one and shake your head. And I haven't listened to that podcast because I feel like I'm going to listen to it and cringe out of my skin.
Yeah, you're like afraid to revisit it.
Yep.
Ready for another one?
Yeah, hit me.
Roasted in the company Slack for ranking Bonanza as favorite Uwe game.
I stand by that. I'll stand by that to this day.
Yeah.
You're in the right show to be doubling down on that one.
Because other than a few exceptions, right? Like, I think I really like Nesfjord, per your recommendation, by the way.
Excellent.
And Tom likes Le Havre. But the other ones were always like, they're good. They're good. I still prefer Bonanza. And it drives our group crazy. They'll like listen to the episode and they'll just be like, why do you keep saying this?
It's because it's a banger. Like, it's because it's great. It's also so different to like the entire rest of what Uwe Rosenberg is known for. Like, it is such a like outlier in the rest of his catalog as a designer known for one very particular kind of like a quite passive, bucolic, charming agriculture game. I guess Bonanza is an agriculture game, fundamentally.
but different vibes.
They're different vibes. I just think that, like, in terms of... I really, really like the Uwe catalog broadly. Like, I have a lot of time for, like, Feast Frodin to just, like, sit down and, like, have a glass of wine of a long evening and, like, put some tiles on a board. But, like, in terms of the amount of times I've played those versus how many times I've played Bonanza, and in terms of the like, intensity of enjoyment of that game versus the rest of his catalog. Like, Feast Frodin, you're spreading that fun out over like 3 hours. It's like a between type 1 and type 2 fun. Whereas Bonanza is like 20 minutes of type 1 fun. It's great.
Yeah.
I like this theory of there being two types of fun. Can you elaborate on that? Is that something you came up with, or?
I'm fairly sure it's like a hiking, mountaineering-y type thing. I don't know if it originated there, but that's the context I know it in, which is like type 1 fun is like going on a canoe down some rapids and being like, woo, this is good, I'm having fun. And then type 2 fun is like your canoe capsizes and you have to like walk to the next town to repair it, is like type 2 fun, because it's not fun in the moment, but the experience is fun in retrospect.
I guess so. I don't know if I would... I could see someone enjoying that experience, yeah.
Yeah, it takes a certain kind of person, right?
Yeah. For me, type 2, just... I'm just happy when it's over, kind of thing. Not looking back on it fondly.
The person was also like, I remember reading about, they were like, oh yeah, there's also type 3 fun, which is like not fun at all. And then I was like, well, why even classify it as a type of fun?
Yes. Type 3 fun.
Type 3 fun. But I think it is useful for categorizing board games, though. Like, I feel like Pipeline is like a type 2 fun game because you're just like crunching on like numbers for the entire duration of it, and you're like having a stressful puzzle. And type 1 fun would be like Twister. I don't know.
Yeah. Or Bonanza, apparently.
Yeah, Bonanza. Like, I don't think it doesn't map onto it perfectly, but there's definitely like a difference of enjoyment for me between like the games that are just like immediately like, you know, bracing and tense and exciting, and the ones that are more like a slow burn puzzle.
It's kind of the like Timmy, Johnny, Spike thing, but like a different angle of it.
Timmy, Johnny, Spike. Is that the Magic the Gathering thing?
Yeah, it's the Magic the Gathering thing.
Can I skip? Can I like do the thing where you like tap the like fast forward 10 seconds on the...
Yeah, we'll skip.
We gave you a click remote before the show, and that's what that's for.
You can do the 4x speed where you just hear Tom go...
like in the middle.
I wish I understood Magic the Gathering, because I was sat like at UK Games Expo. We were like sat at one end of a table playing like some game that I can't remember, and at the other end of the table there were 3 people playing 3-player Magic the Gathering, and they were like voting every round, and there were like 6 different kinds of dice on the table, and it just felt like a completely... I was like, this isn't what I thought it was at all.
It's a different format. That's likely Commander. So,
that's what it sounds like.
Okay. I do think the psychographic profiles are fascinating. So if you'll humor us.
Yeah.
There's the players that they want to win, and winning is kind of what's important about their experience.
Yeah, that's the Spike.
And then there's players that their win internally is style, right? They can't just fall. They need to fall with style.
They want to like come up with cool combos. They want to creatively express themselves.
Which one is that?
That's Johnny.
Yeah. And then there's the other type of player, which is I make big thing go boom, right? They find a way to spin up 20 mana on turn 4, and now they've got a big dinosaur, and they don't really care what it does. It's just it's more about like the aesthetic enjoyment of big dinosaur and stuff.
They don't care about winning or losing as much as like having important big story beats and something exciting happening.
Sure.
And that's Timmy.
Do you have a archetype that you would fall into naturally as a pod, as individuals?
I'm Spike.
Yeah.
You are
Tom
just
Bowers Spike all the way.
Just win the game.
Yeah.
It's not that he doesn't have fun if he's not winning, but that is a big part of what he channels. I'm definitely more on the Johnny Timmy side. I mean, I'll dabble in Spike, but for me, I'm more interested in the shape of things. Yeah. And having interesting experiences versus necessarily winning. So
I think that's a good impulse to have. Like I think me and Matt were like talking on a podcast recently about like rules in board games generally, and we realized like I feel like we hit a nice note of in games broadly, the question is always when someone comes over to the table, they look at the game, they say who's winning. But I feel like what's happening is a much more interesting question when it comes to like games, at least from our perspective. I feel like that's maybe what sets like as a site, it's what we value more in games, and I think that's when people like align with us on in terms of taste. I think they're more interested in seeing like systems do weird things and simulate strange situations rather than they are interested in like a really lean, sharp competitive experience. Not to say that I don't like those things. Like I'm a big fan of like, you know, very tense, sharp 2-player head-to-head kind of stuff. But like my enjoyment of say Netrunner is purely in the fact that that game would tell, you know, really exciting stories, both in terms of the way that the theme would kind of whir away, but also the way that like the game itself, like the flavor text on the cards would produce interesting stories, but so too would the actual like mechanics of the game being played out would create a kind of really interesting arc over the course of the game. I'm one of the Timmy and Johnny guys. I don't remember which one was which.
I'm kind of with you in that with Netrunner. Interestingly enough, I like the aesthetic of Netrunner. Eidolon, you know, hasn't really fully come out, so I can't talk too much about its aesthetic, but I think aesthetically it's a bit of a miss, right? There is something that it can't replace about Netrunner, which is that, what's the cyberpunk? That's what I'm reaching for. Cyberpunk aesthetic where like the corp is really out to try and kill you. That vibe of like, we're really out to try and kill you is not present in Eidolon. And so it doesn't like defeat the game for me, but it's a little bit like disappointing, I suppose. Part of what I liked about Netrunner was being the runner and feeling like I was taking down a truly evil corporation.
Yeah. I agree though that like I think that was the most exciting games of Netrunner I had were the ones where the corporation pivots from being like a kind of distant threat and something that's like imposing and scary to like bashing down your door and like shooting you with a gun. Like that like that was like fighting Wayland especially is like it's very visceral.
But at the same time, like when it came down to tournament day, I was like, well, I have to win, right? Because it's about it's a reflection of my ability as a player, right? If I'm losing, or even if I lose, if I know that I played correctly, I can be satisfied with that. That's what it is for me as a spike. It sounds like you two don't.
I think that it depends on the game, though. Like, I think that there's increasingly, like, we kind of play a little bit of everything on the site. And so I think that broad strokes, I think that I, like, will approach games theme first and not worry so much about, like, being really, like, competitively, I don't know, sharp from game one. I think I prioritize, like, playing the game in, like, a comfy environment for everyone rather than, like, a sharp and pointy one. Which isn't to say that you can't have both, but I think that's my sort of broad thing is game night is to try and make sure that everyone has a nice time first and foremost rather than everyone has a competitively compelling time, I guess. But, like... There are some games that really like tickle, like, you know, I got super obsessed with Arcs. I played shed loads of that game. And I think that a lot of the joy I was getting out of that, certainly like later on in the review cycle when I began playing it, you know, I kind of know what I felt about the game. I just wanted to play it for fun. At that point, I was playing it to try and like push what I could do in that game and try and like get a consistency in winning, which is rare. It doesn't happen every time. And in fact, with Netrunner, like, I had the same thing where I went into Netrunner being like theme first, and I still ultimately played it that way. Like, one of the last points of the review was I was going to go and play in a tournament right at the end, but I kind of decided against it because I thought it would sort of change how I looked at the game, and I think that the review was more focused on the kind of beginner experience of how fun it is to learn Netrunner at the start, how fun it is to get into the basics of it and how enjoyable a world it is to inhabit, rather than like, here's the deep dive on the strategy of this game and how it holds up after X amount of plays in a competitive environment.
That makes sense, yeah.
I was all about Link, even though it has no competitive viability, I learned. But I loved the aesthetic of it, for sure.
But that is like a strange angle then. I think that like Matt, my colleague on the site, whenever we play any game together, he will try and find a underused or underloved mechanic in that game and try and make it the cornerstone of his whole strategy. Like, we played this game, Rasafa, at PAX like a year or two ago, and that was one where like the guy who was teaching us the game was like, oh yeah, there are these cards that you can collect on the side that like I've never seen anyone win with, and like you could see Matt like activate at hearing that sentence. And I think that is like, I think it's very important to have that on the site as well, like especially when it comes to like trying to weigh up the quality of a game, is like, are there just systems in this thing that are fundamentally like not that interesting to pursue if you make them your whole deal? Or
there's always that player in the group, I call it the Mechatol Rex player. You tell them like, oh, by the way, there's this big thing, don't go for it. And they're like, don't tell me what to do. And then they just fixate on it. But
then it's interesting how that can also become a problem as well, like outside of that. Like when I was, again, early on when I was playing Arcs, I played it with one person who just decided that they didn't want to listen to any of the stuff about court cards. They didn't want to listen to any of the stuff about how you actually get points. They just wanted to wipe my fleet off the board. And it does beg an interesting question as to like, is there a correct way to approach games? Like, was that experience effectively like an invalid play of Arcs, or was it, you know, valid given the systems they had in the toolkit?
Part of my thinking is like, not every game should account for different play styles, but at the same time, I think really good games work in various ways. The same way that real good games will work even if one rule gets missed or something like that. So I don't know. Because there's all kinds of games. This is my deep analysis of games.
It's a podcast for the people with big brains. That's what.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's what
You have to have a high IQ to really understand what I'm saying right now. Tom Brewster, did you get around to playing Tim Hutchings' Apollo 47 Technical Handbook?
I did not. I never managed to play Tim Hutchings'
Apollo
Technical Handbook.
Do you still have it, or did you just swap it?
It's back. I think it's still at my family's house where I was living when that unbelievably large tome got sent to me.
I'm fascinated with it, as an artifact, like just the fact that it exists.
Yeah,
I don't have any motivation to read it
to get it out. Did you see the thing that Tim did after the success of 1,000-Year-Old Vampire? He did this Kickstarter campaign for a thing that was completely useless. I don't know do you know about this?
Is it just the same one, but it has like all blank text? Or
Yeah. It's a copy of 1,000-Year-Old Vampire, but with basically all of the text and images completely redacted. And people were so annoyed at what they received, even though the Kickstarter was like, this is the most useless object you will ever book. Like,
yeah, Kickstarter is so weird. I wonder if people actually read things when they click buy sometimes. That's my hot take. Because there was this game called The Emperor's New Clothes.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It was like a metatextual, like, people will buy anything on Kickstarter. This game is literally garbage. It has nothing. It's just blank cards and blank dice. And people went, oh, and then they bought it, and then they bashed it on BGG. They gave it like a 1 out of 10. They were like, received my copy. It's only blank cards. 1 out of 10.
It has a 4.4 on Board Game Geek. That's kind of astounding, considering it's literally there is nothing involved. I didn't know whether it was like because when I was putting together the video on games with no rules, I wanted to like poke around this and see if it kind of like was anything. But has it been like, after it's been released, has it kind of been widely known as like something that is just like a practical joke, essentially? Well,
part of the downvotes was there were really bad fulfillment issues. So I will just concede that. But the other disappointment was like, I expected it to have something or some kind of additional follow-up, either a rule book that explained, but it was literally just the prototype components, basically.
It sounds like a clickhole headline, just like heartbreaking, disappointed consumer bought nothing and expected something in return.
That's really good, Tom.
Apparently there's a Emperor's New Clothes 6-player sycophant edition. 4-player swindler edition. Okay.
Yeah. Favorite move in Cuppy Flicky 2?
Yeah. Now we're talking. That's a real game right there. This was Essen a couple years ago. That was like the kind of thing where we got to it was during Essen and we were playing games in this like, I remember it being really warm because we had this like, Efka of No Pun Included fame had booked out this like boardroom space at the hotel that we were in. And so we had like a nice space to play board games in, which was lovely. But it also meant that we were, by the end of the day, like we were just sat in basically one room for the entire day, just playing like heavy board games back to back to back and like subsisting off like kebabs and pints. It was bad. It was bad for our health, mentally and physically. But towards the end of the day, we got to that point of delirium where we were like, you know what? We've played enough games. Let's make our own. And we cooked up Cuppy Flicky 2, the most beautiful dexterity game ever to exist. It was weirdly good. I'll say that.
Okay.
You had to like flick a coaster between some other things. I can't remember the details.
So people at home, they could play that the Golfing on Mars game or whatever that's called to get a semi-adjacent experience.
If you just go to like a pub and you steal a bunch of coasters and then you come home and you start like throwing them at a wall, you'll have kind of an equivalent gameplay experience to Cuppy Flicky 2, the sequel. I definitely remember we had like a whole thing where it was like you had to flicky cuppy, and if you missed the cup, then you'd fucky uppied or something like that.
That's pretty good.
It had a whole syntax. It was getting a little delirious by the end of that convention. I always think like conventions, we really like bash ourselves over the head over conventions where we just play like back-to-back heavy games for like an entire weekend, and then we come back and we're just cooked. And I feel like I should try my best to just not play any games at conventions so we can play them in like more sterile conditions than what a convention will do to us.
What would you do at a game convention if you didn't play any games?
Chat to nice people about the games they make, maybe? I don't know.
Hey, just go around and hang out. Sure.
Just go around yapping. Like this year at UK Games Expo, I only got to play one game for the entire convention. Actually, I tell a lie. We played Bonanza a few times. But the one game that I actually got to play was Kalimala, which I played on the last day as a like, we have to play at least one beige-looking Euro game. And we did get to play Kalimala. And it was all right. That's the hot take. You get that pre-Shut Up and Sit Down podcast.
That's like a shelf-stable take right there. That's good.
Yeah, I'm learning.
In university, I worked for a radio station. I remember Domino's Pizza dropped off a box of marketing merch for us. We didn't know what the hell to do with. I mean, I don't know how you integrate that with a radio station, but we had all these Domino's plastic cups and Domino's stress balls. At some point, they started becoming their own game, kind of like Cuppy Flicky. We called it Cup Ball. And you would have a cup and a ball, and you'd throw the ball out of the cup and have to catch the other person's ball that they were throwing. And you do that in a circle, basically.
That's exceptional.
Eventually, we dropped the balls, and it became cup, and you had to throw the cup out of a cup and land it in the other cup. And that was really hard. That was like the next level, but...
I watched like popular internet streamer Northern Lion doing his trick shot simulator streams.
Trick shot simulator is so fucking funny as a concept.
It's so funny. Some of the things he was saying during that stream like spoke to me in a way that was like, because I remember watching like a bunch of that stream while I was editing a video, and then like the game night I had planned was like some hellaciously complicated Euro game, and I was just like looking at the table and I was looking at the components and the numbers, and I was like, man, I really want to get a ping pong ball in a cup right now. Like that's what I really want deep down.
I loved those streams because he was just constantly arguing with chat about the Sisyphean effort of life. and he's just like, why the fuck would I do anything else except this? Like, and he's like, you're tuning in either way, so stop yelling at me to play Elden Ring again or something like that. It's like...
It was just a week-long argument with his chat, and I just think that's like what I'm seated for. Is just the kind of content that like people just everyone is telling him to stop, but he's enjoying it. That's what matters. They're seated either way.
Yeah,
I mean, Northern Lion could be doing anything. It's still entertaining.
He could be doing anything. He's truly the only good streamer.
It's hard not to like bring him into every conversation with normal folks that don't watch him. For me, I don't know if you experience that, because he'll say something so innocuous, but simultaneously life-changing. He was arguing with someone about self-checkout, and they're like, I can always get through 20% faster than, standing in line. And he was like, and to do what? Go home and do fuck all? And I was like, oh my God, like it hit me so hard.
It's so true. Yeah. There was one recently where like someone was like saying in chat, they were saying something about how, I can't think of the exact comparison, but he was comparing something like Elden Ring to like Trick Shot Simulator, for example. And then someone in chat was like, what the hell? How are those even comparable? And he was like, well, they're played with the same hours, bud. And I'm like, it's so true. It's so true.
It's true.
Yeah.
They are played with the same hours.
I do feel bad for the significant others, the partners of Northern Lion fans, because they just have to hear that shit all the time and not actually consume it. Like Northern Lion is kind of the Gen Z / millennial Scorsese in the sense of like, if you don't consume the content, it's just so obnoxious.
Yeah, my partner does not really gel with the endless tracks of Northern Lion compilations that I'll just have like rotating while I eat like a sandwich. I am trying so hard to make sure that his vernacular does not seep into my videos. It's like I like wrote a line in a video that was like, "That's nothing for a guy like me" in a video, and then immediately had to be like, "Scrub it, get rid of it." No.
I think I said "get it twisted" in a recent episode, and I was like, "Oh no!"
Oh yeah,
it's happening. It's happening.
So similar vibes to Cuppy Flicky, but have you gone to play Station Fall with anything fewer than 9 players?
People were so annoyed about the fact that we played Station Fall at 9 players, as was recommended by the people at the stand who gave us a copy of Station Fall. They were like, "Oh, you should play this." And we were like, "Oh, after like PAX, we're going to go and stay at this like house with a bunch of friends and there's going to be like 10 of us." And they were like, "Oh, that's perfect. You'll love this." And then we did it and it was awful. And people online were like, "Well, why did you play it?" Because they told us to play it at that player count. Anyway, I haven't played it since.
I really feel like a lot of games should have smaller player counts.
Yes.
Like we played Caverna with 7 or 6.
That's
7?
too many
I don't
people.
remember. Like
anything over 3 is like, even 3 is already a little bit painful for most of Uwe's games, which I think is why Fields of Arle might be like his best agriculture game, because
it
locks you in.
Yeah, exactly. He said
it forces you to actually do 2.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, 6 was nightmare mode for sure.
That's torturous. That sounds rough. I think that it's weird though, because people were like really saying that, like they were like, "Oh, you would really like Station Fall," and I need to play it again. I agree. Like I'd like to play it at a smaller player count, trusting that people know what they're talking about, that I would probably like the game. But I'm worried that it felt like a silly game. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, I like silly games. But I like silly games that aren't, like, they're organically silly. Like, they will do daft things because the systems work in a certain way to spit out, like, a comedic result. Like, playing a lot of, like, again, we'll probably come back to this later, but playing a lot of Innovation at the moment, and it's like, that is a funny game. But none of the cards read individually are funny, I don't think.
Right.
Like, they're quite dry, like, cause and effect. And there might be, like, a little smirk because the effect is kind of, like, cogent with what it is cogent with what it's
like
doing with
a
the
thematic
theme.
Joke, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
And you'll be like, that's cute. Like, that's funny. But, like, I have found myself really chuckling at that game because it spits out these crazy, like, busted gameplay scenarios that just, like, read as fast to me. Whereas I feel like going into Station Fall, it's like, oh, one of the characters is, like, a monkey. And, like, there are, like, jokes on the things. And it feels, like, kind of wacky in a way that I don't know if I necessarily gel with.
Station Fall has Joss Whedon quips in the flavor text, and it's like, yeah, I'm with you.
We'll do some lightning round ones, just mostly for your enjoyment, Tom.
Hell yeah, I love that.
I've acquired the geometry. Is that Spire of Stars?
That is all raids. It's Destiny as an entity.
You just use it as a placeholder for whatever object.
Yes. Well, it's more that like that's just like the loop of Destiny is acquiring geometry. You just want to get things.
I thought it was shorthand for like aneoic retainer or whatever the hell, like when they give you that like status, you know.
It is definitely useful for that as well. Like that game is just getting an orb or a square and dunking it. That's like 90% of the mechanics in Destiny.
When we were doing raids, our shorthand for getting a specific status effect was, "I have the Ligma." And I'm like, all right, pass the Ligma to me.
How are you? How old? 32? And you're hitting us with Ligma?
Right.
We try to stay up with the lingo, you know.
Yeah.
And then we just
I'm one of 4 siblings, and my 3 younger sisters, I delight in nothing more than cringing them out of their skin. Than like saying something's cap or like saying that like I've got Riz. I don't know. They hate it. They like bristle every time.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
We have interns at work, and I just continuously torture them.
Yeah. My kids love to hate the Lava Chicken song, so that's been my thing around the house recently.
You've been hitting them with that one. God, I wish I'd have watched the Minecraft movie before this podcast.
That's all right. I just want to say about our age. Recently, I had a friend described me as too young to know about the 2001 film Rat Race, too old to be a Skibbity Sigma Rizzler. And that is still affecting me.
I like that. No, that's... Yeah. I feel like I might be in the same bucket because I'm aware of that movie. Like, right. I know it exists, but I couldn't tell you anything about it. And I think that's the same with Skibbity Riz. I know it exists, but I don't understand any of the context around the... I know there's a toilet involved. I know there's a Gmod involved. That's about it.
Favorite song by Frog?
Oh, that's an impossible question. That's horrible. Why would you ask me such a thing? What a band. Frog has been a pretty recent addition to my music rotation, but like ever since starting to listen to them, I have fallen deeply in love with their music. But I do just like sing their songs around the house constantly. I think that I'm like, I have a thing where I am almost certain that I'm the number one Frog listener, full stop. I think that is my one and only claim to fame, because Spotify in the like end of year roundup, it was like, congratulations, you're in the top 0.0001% of listeners of this band. Like it was.
Let's get it out there.
It was so distressing, like how much I listened to that band last year, especially.
No, it means you're onto something, and others haven't caught up yet.
Like, if I were to pin it down to, like, one song, I think God Once Loved a Woman off of whatever, we probably already have it, is, like, just a beautiful song. I really like Rubbernecking on their debut. Yeah. Oh, what a band. Listen to Frog now.
Okay.
Do it.
Right. Better known, but still a little niche. Zachtronics. Why is Space Chem their best game?
Is it their best game?
That's a very leading question. It's my favorite of theirs.
I've actually not played Space Chem. I've played the rest of the catalog, I think. I never got although I didn't get round to, was it called like Last Call BBS or something? The one that was like the whole game in a fake PC. I didn't play that one. I didn't play Mobius Front. I have it, but I never actually got around to like properly playing it. Mm-hmm. But I really liked Infinifactory and Opus Magnum. Those are really exceptional video games.
I think the nice thing with Space Chem is it has a little bit more scaffolding, but I recognize that that's something people don't like about Zachtronics games, so I'm definitely buying.
When you say scaffolding, you mean?
I feel like the game introduces its concepts in a way that is bearable.
Right, rather than just throwing you into it like Shenzhen or something.
Yeah, Shenzhen especially is kind of like you have to do the tinkering and stuff. Although that like doing some of the research, I was listening to the Dream Game Studios recording. It sounds like that's your thing though. That's like what you're looking for is, I don't understand any of these mechanisms or these concepts. Let me dig further, and then just unfurling and finding the mystery behind how everything works. So
yes, I think that's like in terms of games that I get really hooked on, it's like one of two things. It's either like intricate kind of like puzzle box, like slowly revealing itself over time, dig through the game, everything's a little obfuscated type stuff, or it's complete slop. And those are the two genres that I get into. It's like why, you mentioned it on like a podcast recently, but like it's why I love Rain World so much. Isn't so much of that game is like so heavily obfuscated behind like zero tutorialization and just exactly. And you do things because you think they would make sense, and you're often rewarded. And I love that kind of loop of like hypothesis and result in any game.
This is why we're Northern Lion fans, probably.
That's true. One more. If there's anything you could have changed about your Game of Thrones application, what would it be? Anything from the format or even just the choice of the game?
There's like the funniest cut in that where it's like me trying my best to try and like impress them with my technical know-how, despite it being the first time that I'd like really seriously touched a video camera before.
For context, this was Tom Brewster's application for Shut Up and Sit Down.
As my internship video. It was on the Game of Thrones board game. It starts off with like a kind of, the reason that they liked the application was because there's this shot at the start where like I explain the rules of the game whilst like running around my student flat, and like all of the rules are like on like big bits of paper that are like stuck to the wall, and so it's like kind of this weird like moving presentation that looks like I've kind of lost my mind. And it's so funny how like at that time, the Game of Thrones board game, I was like, this is so complicated. And like now looking back on it, it's like, it's so much like there's a whole world out there of horrifying systems for me to uncover. It
is funny going back and watching your early stuff with Shut Up and Sit Down, as well as like listening to the first few podcasts, and you're like, oh hey, you know, you're like a little boy.
I really am.
And kind of seeing you evolve and become more and more confident and really finding your stride, because now we have you as you are now, which is like one of the most entertaining and most, I guess, innovative, I would say, you know, hinting to the topic up here, but kind of people in the board game space.
That's very kind. I think I have peaked. So
it's all downhill from
downhill
here.
now.
Yeah.
No, but I think it speaks to Quinn's and Matt and just everyone involved's ability to have seen the diamond in the rough and kind of like
there's the thing that like if I were to change like one thing about it, I think there's a really like funny bit which is like me kind of like completely not understanding what they were looking for in the videos, where like I'm like, oh, and this game's even better with a little bit of theming, and I do like a match cut from like the shot of me at the table to another shot of me at the table, but like I'm now wearing like a sort of Viking-y looking costume, but the cut is terrible and the energy is like completely non-existent, and it's so like it was me trying to be like, oh, look at this, like look, I can do like clever stuff with a camera, but like I couldn't, and also like I feel like that what the piece of advice that Matt and Quinn's gave to like interns applying to do the videos for the site like was try and relay this board game to us watching on the other end like you were excitedly telling a friend about a game. And I always need to try and like remember that as like a core tenet of what makes the videos like fun and exciting, is that they're at their best when it's like you're showing someone something like, oh my god, I'm really like bursting with excitement about this game, you've got to check it out, and having that kind of like raw energy. And then it doesn't really matter like how technically proficient the video is and like how, you know, nice and sweeping the B-roll shots are or how much text you put on the screen. Like fundamentally what people are really there for is like the kind of frothing excitement about like this cool hobby that proportionally not that many people are really clued in on.
Yeah, exactly.
All of my energy was focused on like making it like kind of like pop and be like unique and weird in its presentation rather than just like getting excited about the game. And I think that's the like thing that I've developed a bit more of over time, is being able to just be earnestly really like amped about something rather than having to like necessarily make the video super. I mean, I still did that a lot, like early on was like very high energy editing to try and like capture that excitement, but organically the best thing to do is just try and really earnestly relay how genuinely excited you are about something.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, authenticity is probably the most potent algorithmic, like,
the hell
you know
are
what I mean?
Ingredients.
No, I think that's true. I think people like really want to like they want to connect with something, and like I think fundamentally people come back to our stuff because we are like they can tell that we're like honest in how we feel about things. We're not approaching things from like an analytical. We are obviously analyzing games, but we're not like dissecting them or picking them apart. We're just like finding the bits of it that resonated with us and then trying to relay why that resonated with us to the audience, rather than trying to like appraise where something fits in the sort of canon of board games. Although I guess we are trying to do that with the top 100 thing when it returns.
Oh yes, yeah.
That's a little tongue-in-cheek though, so that's fine.
Well, Kenny, should we finally let the beast out? Unleash the beast?
Yes.
And let him talk about innovation, because he's been suggesting it for the last like hour.
As they say, authenticity is the whatever the hell you said, Tom.
The most potent algorithm ingredients. That's what I think. What I was trying to say.
The most potent algorithmic ingredients.
The most potent. Just a single sprinkle, and it will send you to the top of YouTube instantly.
It's like the cayenne pepper of algorithm.
Yeah. That's why Mr.
Success.
Beast is so popular.
Because he's so authentic.
Authentic.
All right. Tom Brewster, what have you played recently?
I'm so glad you asked. I've been playing the 2010 game Innovation, designed by Chudyk and published by Asmadi Games, for a video review that should be out pretty soon. It might be out already when this podcast goes out. And it's been a blast. It's been great. I've loved innovation for like a really long time. I frustratingly already have a problem with the review that I've made, which is that I show off like innovation 3rd edition because that's the innovation that like I have played like shed loads of, and that's what I use on camera. But I think that people might be frustrated that I'm not using like innovation ultimate for my B-roll because that's what people can actually buy. It's probably fine.
If it's any reassurance, I don't think people will tell the difference. Like they did touch up the cards a little bit, but like they are pretty similar, you know.
Innovation Ultimate has this really nice, like kind of like very dark navy box with like silver like detailing on it, and I wish that was the aesthetic they went for with Innovation rather than the brown.
What you can do is in post just edit an image of Ultimate Edition over every version.
Not even like green screen, just like have it float over the top of it, kind of bouncing around.
Not even
as
a
the camera
zero
pans.
effort.
Yep. That's kind of in keeping. That's a part of the brand, I think. But yeah, I've been playing shed loads of it. It's a delight. It's really cool. I love the curve that Innovation has of like you introduce it to someone for the first time and they're like they kind of rightly will see it as being kind of just like weird and bullshit and nonsense.
Yeah, almost like Monopoly Deal.
I want to go back and play Monopoly Deal now that you've been glazing it on your podcast, because we played it after a convention. It was great, but I don't remember it.
I also like Monopoly Deal, but I don't want our legacy to be that every time we have a guest on, we've encouraged them to go play it.
Of all the games in the world, that's the one that you're going to send us away.
Yeah, like, is this it? Like, is this what we're doing? Because, like...
It's that and Brass Lancashire.
Yeah, I was on Tom and Kenny's podcast. They told me to play Monopoly Deal, and I tried it, and it really wasn't that good. Like, I don't want that to be the narrative, you know? So I don't know.
You'll go back like many years from now, look back on those early episodes and be like, what were we thinking? What were we doing?
Yeah. Counterpoint, though, Cole Worley @s us on Blue Sky, goes, finally got around to Monopoly Deal, and you guys are right. Big things coming soon, and his next game is like some iteration of Monopoly Deal.
Well, that was so funny playing I'm the Boss at a convention with Cole and Liz and some other folks. Was playing I'm the Boss, which, if you've not played it, is this delightful like Sid Saxon negotiation game. It's so fun. It's so good. And the fact that game ends on like a dice roll 1 through 6, and then like that happened, and then I looked at Cole in that moment and was like, really? And he was like, yep. And we just knew it was like you like in that one moment realizing that that's where the end game of Oath comes from, is like the 1 through 6 dice roll and I'm the Boss. It was so good. But yeah, like what I was saying is like Innovation is this kind of this like, it's such a bizarre game because at the start like you'll show it to someone and they'll think like it's kind of nonsense like Monopoly Deal, but then over time you will grow like a fondness for like what you can actually do in the space and how like actually kind of clever and devious it is. And I love that it has the like almost like not party game, because it isn't a party game because it's like I only really play it at 2 players, but like very silly, light, fluffy kind of nonsense game when you start playing it, and then the like really sharp 2-player head-to-head experience that is crammed into the same like deck of 100 cards. I just think that's fascinating and really cool, and still exists even though they've gone crazy with it in 4th edition and changed how the game works in a bunch of ways. I had one thing that I wanted to bring to this podcast. Have you seen? Hold on, I'm gonna find the exact wording on the card. There's a card in New Innovation Ultimate called Elon Musk's Tesla Roadster.
Oh, no, I did not see that one. Is that in deck 11 or something?
Also, there's Bear Grylls, by the way. They put Bear Grylls in the game.
Bear Grylls is like a factor in civilization's progress, according to Carl Chudyk. I kind of respect that take.
Well, you know, he has the gameplay effect of returning you to the Stone Age. Like, he has the same gameplay effect as like a nuke. It's when you melt this card, junk all cards that are not achievements or in decks, introduce the 0 deck and draw a 0. The 0 deck is the survival age, and like 90% of the cards make you lose the game.
That's so awesome. It's like Scheherazade almost.
That sounds like a Carl Chudyk card for sure. Yeah,
it really does.
You loved innovation so much. What if you started over in hard mode?
But I love that it's like it's not like with the nuke where you kind of like start from the beginning again. It's like you go to age 0 and none of the rest of the game exists. You just play this weird mini game where you both try to like stave off starvation. It's like Meltwater. It's ridiculous.
That's awesome.
The reason it is Elon Musk's Tesla Roadster is because it's the one they launched into space, which is
I see. Okay.
And it's in deck 10. If you have the most cards in your score pile, you win. Otherwise, drawn, reveal an 11. Score all cards on your board of the color of the drawn card. If you do, return the drawn card. Otherwise, meld it. It's got a lot of text on it. But it's in the like artifacts thing, and I think the idea is like, well, what would be like an artifact in the Prudence age, in age 11 or age 10? Like, what would be like considered an artifact? And I guess like an orbiting piece of space debris serving no use to anyone that was like the relic of like an insane man is kind of like, it kind of fits. But it's so weird that it says specifically Musk's Tesla Roadster. It's like a jump scare because it's not like, there's like the Communist Manifesto is in there, and it's not like it's Marx's Communist Manifesto. It's just the Communist Manifesto, and it's like most of the game development was done in 2023 and 2024, so it's like I can see why they would include it then, but like I can't imagine them like, I hope they wouldn't okay it now in the post-salute era.
Yeah, I assume this is like pre-crowdfunding. They already had it locked in, and they're watching the news, and they're just like, "Oh no!" Chris Cheslick is just like, "Oh, we gotta print some stickers for this one."
Because then I was talking to my partner about it, and they were like, it does feel like something where other questionable historical figures are in the game. I guess it just doesn't feel like as kind of raw as it does now with this man like doing the things that he's doing out there. It's like there isn't like a Netanyahu card in the innovation deck.
Yeah, I mean, Tom and I were talking about this. There's a reason it feels weirder to play as the anti-suffragists in Votes for Women than to play like the Nazis in a World War II game. It's because it just feels more relevant. There aren't really like German Nazi. Well, I don't know. We're not fighting World War II anymore, I guess is what I'm saying. So I think that it might be a similar parallel where it's like some of the other characters that are present in innovation, they're not alive or they're not making decisions right now. So
right. Yeah, having something that is like will obviously be a huge part of history, but the fact that it's history that's happening now is definitely weirder. And that's like a lot of the cards that are in the like age 11 stuff, which is like kind of now, are like super. One of the age 11 cards is What Does the Fox Say?
No!
It made me cringe out my skin when I saw it, because it was like, when did this get put into the card pool, and do they still think that it should be in there?
I didn't know Carl Chudyk is like competing with Looney Labs for his.
Anyway, that's innovation. It's good. It's still good.
Thank you so much. I wasn't super familiar with some of the newer cards, so I'm glad to hear about these
you're caught up
editions.
On the new stuff. Yeah, like some of them are pretty funny. There's like esports is in there and stuff like that, and it's there's still an element of it, but it's getting to that point where it's like we always talk about how like Suburbia as a board game, we found Suburbia like incredibly funny because you would like during the game organically you might like put an old people's home next to a cliff. That was just like a funny,
that's how you get points.
Right. It's just a funny situation that emerges from the game. Yeah. Whereas when Suburbia started being like, there's a alien invasion tile or like zombies or whatever, it's like it's trying to be funny, but like it is not as funny as just the sort of dry.
As well.
Right. And I think that's some of the age 11 cards in this like don't play as well as some of the like funnier, like Canning is just so funny to me as a card. Like the idea that you just start like putting your entire civilization into cans is great.
Have either of you heard the Fall Out Boy cover of We Didn't Start the Fire? It's given that energy.
Is it like a modernized We Didn't Start the Fire?
Yes. It's one of the most uncomfortable to listen to songs of the decade.
That's so good. I can't
Maybe
wait.
in 20 years it'll work, but like they say things like more war in Afghanistan, Cubs go all the way again, Obama, Spielberg, explosion, Lebanon.
It's like there's no through line. There's no narrative to it.
QAnon, Trump gets impeached twice. Polar bears got no ice. Firefest, Black Parade. That's a good segment right there.
Yeah, they juxtapose COVID with Minecraft, and it's just I don't know about that.
Oh my god, yeah, some of this is putting ISIS and LeBron James next to each other. Certainly. Wait, shit. Shinzo Abe blown away. Meghan Markle? Oh, God. Wow.
It's real, and it's not a joke, as far as we can tell.
They rhymed George Floyd with Metroid.
That's tasteless. Oh, no.
As far as I know, they were like, this is art. We are making an important song. It wasn't a self-aware satire. So
no, it's they're contributing to the culture in a major way. No, oh, Fall Out Boy, what the hell?
I'll post that in the show notes, listeners.
I feel like the rhyme syllable cadence is really off. They really worked too hard to shove some of these things in.
They were trying their best to get all of history into one song. I'd like to see you try.
That's fair. I'm not saying I could do much better, but I just wouldn't do it.
Yeah, there you go. Don't do it. Oh. Well, okay, this leads us perfectly into our topic.
That's true. It's an iteration, isn't it?
Tom, you want to do your
I was going to say, we need to stop bullshitting. It's been a long time already, and it's time to get into the real meat and potatoes of the podcast, the part of the show that people tune in week after week, no matter what else is going on in their lives, to listen to. This is the thing they really care about, and that's whatever we've decided arbitrarily to make the main focus of the episode. And this week, Tom Brewster, you picked this, am I correct?
I did.
Iteration and innovation. What does that mean to you?
Just an excuse to talk about the Elon Musk Roadster card in innovation, really.
I was going to say your game you played.
Yeah, you didn't have to pick innovation, Tom. You could have picked the game that wasn't the title of it.
It's a perfect sync. No, I think that I've been... Okay, next month, I'm going to Berlin, Germany, to go and talk to some German board game people about board games. It's like a board game media day where we're going to talk about games, and they asked me to do some words, to say some words at this event.
It sounds like you're going to speak in front of a federal subcommittee of some kind, you're going to Capitol Hill,
and really get to the bottom of what the hell is going on with worker placement. Yeah.
I'm not going to lie, Tom Brewster. It does sound like you were just replaced by a doppelganger, where you're like, I'm going to some board game thing about board games, and I'm going to write some words.
Just in that 1 second, I activated the AI that I've got in the back end of Discord to just fill my boots for a bit. It's it's because I'm cringing at describing it properly. I was asked to do a keynote speech at this thing, and I don't like that already. It those words, you can tell. Anyway, the point is that I'm writing some stuff about that now, about how I want to talk to that audience about games and what I want to talk about in that kind of thing. And a lot of it is, I think, to do with I have this kind of crackpot theory that's been simmering over time, which is that the critical board game space, board game reviewers, especially on YouTube across the board, are kind of risk averse and very much latch on to familiarity in games, and specifically will engage with a game as a rule set rather than as a play experience. And this is true of the way that the videos are formatted, because they'll be let me explain to you all of the rules of this game, and here is what we thought of it afterwards. And I think that the sort of quite formulaic approach to to how reviewers tackle games, and specifically how they'll tackle games as trying to kind of get the correct kind of top-down take on a game rather than like just experiencing it for themselves and thinking about what they thought of it as a person rather than as like a market force. I think it leads to like criticism of games and a games industry that is producing a lot of like pretty tepid releases at the moment. A lot of games that come through the door that are like good but not exceptional.
Right, there's a feedback loop.
Right, exactly. It's like these games get made and they get made for an audience of like reviewers or people who are informed by reviewers who are fundamentally seeking for like a safe pair of hands over something that's like a little stranger and weirder. There was a really interesting thing that I saw the other day. I found it absolutely fascinating. David Turtzi published like a little promo for the next game that he was working on, and it just had like a mechanics list of like things that were in this game.
I think we skeeted that too, I believe. What did we put, Tom? Do you remember? We did like a version for Christopher Nolan as a parody.
We had a good laugh about that in the Discord because there is like someone saying, oh, imagine, you're not sold until you get to like that last mechanic. And it's like variable player powers or whatever it was.
No,
just
it was like, end of round bonuses. That was one of the teasers.
End of round bonuses. That's when the eyes crack open like real shit,
David Turtzi is coming out with a new game. I'm not really interested in these things. Hold on. End of round bonuses.
Yeah.
Mechanisms, action, romance, science fiction, thinky things. Christopher Nolan
probably has Leonardo DiCaprio in it. I don't know. Yeah, like DiCaprio. But I think that it's such a weird way of like looking at games to me. And like there was something I've played a lot of Molly House, which I'm big into, as you might expect from the Cole Worley, Joe Kelly fan in me. But that is a game that like has roll and move, and people are engaging with that immediately people's heckles are up being like, I don't like roll and move. Roll and move is a bad mechanic. It's not good. It's something that we don't like. And I think that level of like risk aversion to wanting to enjoy something, like being seen enjoying something so ungainly as roll and move, is like genuinely like a factor in some people's critical analysis of that game.
I think that generalizations about theme and mechanism can be helpful to steer a conversation or give a feel for a game, but they often suffer from being very reductive. And like we'll see this oftentimes all the time. It's like oftentimes all the time. Holy shit, get it together, Kenny. Where people will say things online like, oh, I just hate all Ameritrash games, or I hate all dry Euros. And it's like Hansa Teutonica is a perfect example where people are going to look at Hansa and they're going to go, dry Euro, don't want to play it. And it's like, it doesn't play like any of the Italian master games. It doesn't even play like a Knizia game. Like these are all very different games. So to just put them all in a bucket seems a little weird.
No, yeah. I completely agree.
I think to what you're saying, there's a feeling sometimes that I get that we're part of almost like a newly forming coalition of designers, reviewers, and players that are more interested in the vibes, the stories, the connections, and the people of games. And we're not stuck on the IGN almost style review of games for its like mechanical abilities and stuff like that. Like it's like we need to evolve as a subculture, because yes, there was a period where the only thing most people had played was Monopoly. I think a lot of people are past that now, like Wingspans on TikTok and stuff, right? People are starting to become familiar that there's a world outside of Hasbro, Parker Brothers. It's not enough anymore just to sell people on the idea that they're missing out on something mechanically. It's like, why should I play Molly House instead of Wingspan at this point is more the question. And that I think comes down a lot more to like, well, what is the game saying? And I think too, there's a celebration more and more. We talked to Dan Thoreau about this a little bit, of like the designers as artists, the games as art, right? And I think that's a new, it's weird that that's an emergent thought, and it's, the late 2020s. But that's kind of how it feels. I don't know if you're with me on that.
No, I 100%. And I think that like, I definitely like, I think it's very fair, like for folks online to give me a a reasonable amount of mockery for being such a Cole Worley stan in my tastes in games. But I do think that in terms of like games being made at scale by designers who want to make games that are like saying a bit more than just their raw mechanics. I think that's like why I'm drawn to Cole's game specifically. That's why I feel like I can write, as many words as I did on things like John Company, because they feel like they are games that are not just about like what was the sort of competitive experience of them, what are they saying as like a piece. And increasingly I feel like we're seeing more and more of those games, and so there's a critical vocabulary expanding around that. But it's interesting because we're still in an industry where not every game is going to be appraised like that. Like the vast majority of them are going to be appraised as, is this satisfying to play? And that's kind of like, fundamentally, it's about being able to identify which is in which category is kind of an interesting task, and how sometimes these games can like transcend between the two of them. And how they can spur on like further thoughts about like the nature of play as a group.
Cole is truly a unicorn in the sense that a lot of designers, they fall in the like, I'm going to use John DeClaire as an example, but like they fall in this category of having a really good pulse on what appeals to people and what's just fun, but they're not really trying to make anything that makes a person think, in my opinion. Again, this is just my opinion. But then you have like Amabel Holland, who makes games that are oftentimes really inaccessible or, not for everyone. And that's intentional.
Yeah.
She's very intentional about that. But they're wrestling with really either interesting concepts or interesting themes or something like that. Cole has somehow managed to do both in the sense that he's the Radiohead of board games to a certain sense, where there's like a commercial appeal as well as a certain depth to what he's producing. So I think that's fascinating.
And I think a lot of that is to do with, like the breakout hit with Root is to do with the presentation of the kind of like, the slightly odd ideas in this kind of wrapper that would make people more likely to engage with them. And that's where I think that it would be, I want to try and spend more time as a reviewer, like making sure that I'm engaging with games that don't have the wrapper that Root has. They don't have that level of like nice art around them yet, but they may well break into the more mainstream hobby if they gain that kind of like wrapper around them to make them more accessible. Right. And that's where I think that like a lot of the board game critical sphere is kind of like failing some of the more fringe designers, is because we're not like jumping onto games that are doing strange things with mechanics because we have this idea of like, well, this is how a game is, this is how a game should be presented. And I'm now more than ever interested in tackling things that don't fit that like standard kind of like shape of a game, because that's where the sort of more interesting stuff is definitely happening.
It's very metatextual what you're saying. And like we talked about this prior to the episode, this idea that like it's not just the designers taking a risk and innovating, but also the folks like us taking a risk and covering that, and also just talking about games in new ways. If we're not taking a risk, the game makers won't take a risk either. And I think the innovation, it's like a feedback loop of sorts. If you take it in a direction of being safe, then the things will just continue to reinforce being safe. Whereas if you try to go in these new directions and you have a breakthrough, then that becomes the new thing to chase.
Yes, it definitely feels like after, and I could be kind of muddy on my timings of this here, but like it definitely did feel like after the success of Root, we did see like a big surge in asymmetric design, which is, I think, a really interesting, field of design. I think it's really compelling. But it's interesting that like it kind of stopped at being like war games with different player powers rather than things that are a little more like, I want to see more games that are kind of like 1v all or things like that, right? Like I want to see more interesting player relationships than what we tend to have, which is games where 4 people of an equal standing compete to be the best in the same arena. I want to see games that will produce like more interesting states because the player relations are a little different or a little more strained. Right. I always think about, there's that game, what is the name of it? It's a role-playing game.
Dread? Dungeons and Dragons?
Oh, Yeah. It's Dungeons and Dragons. That's the one. Oh, what the hell was it called? I can't remember what it's called, but there's this role-playing game that the site did a review for ages ago where one of the rules is like the GM is the person around the table who makes the most money. And I find that like a really distressing but also enticing bit of game design to create, not organic, but a kind of strained player relationship immediately.
Right.
And I feel like that's the kind of thing that if someone were to read that in a rule book, like if most reviewers, including us, honestly, were to read that in a rule book, we would kind of like not want to engage with it from the jump. But yeah, I feel like that kind of thing is where the more interesting games lie, in like kind of bending the kind of accepted norms of how the structure of a game would work. I'm waffling. This is turbo bullshit mode from me. I've just been writing this like thing for too long about getting into games. I have a whole diversion about Adam Sandler in this like German thing. I've got a picture of Adam Sandler on my desk. I've had it there for absolutely ages, and the reason that he's there is because I think Adam Sandler in Uncut Gems is like a truly generational performance from an actor who I hate. And I think it's really interesting how when film critics review films, they will not say, I don't like Adam Sandler, so I didn't like this movie. They'll be like, I didn't like Adam Sandler's performance in this film.
Right.
And I think that the way that people approach board games is just like, I don't like worker placement, so I didn't like this game. And it's like, no, you want to look at how it's administered into the game. You want to look at how it like changes player relationships and develops like an interesting tension, rather than just being like, this ain't for me, bud.
That's a smart way of looking at it. I've never thought to like come away from a game. Maybe I ought to do this with Food Chain Magnate almost.
There we go.
Somehow I can come up with a way where I'm like, the appeal is just not for me.
You don't have to like Food Chain Magnate. I don't know why you keep trying to find ways to like it.
Well, but it's interesting to think of maybe it's just one or two mechanics though that are souring it, and you know what I mean? Like it's not the entire package.
So not to pat ourselves on the back, but like I do think we do a good job of not falling into these pitfalls. You and I, Tom Bauer.
This is true of the shelf stable pod that I've listened to thus far.
Yeah, so I think you've given Food Chain enough of a chance. Some would argue too much, and it's
maybe
like
too much.
That's okay. You don't have to like everything that I like, and like you can see its value without enjoying it. Like I've seen your face when we play that game. Like I know you're trying to give it a good shot.
Don't worry, Shelf Stable Pod is in the clear. I'm just using this platform to subtweet certain reviewers. That's all it is.
We're always vaguing the dice tower a little bit, I think.
I think it goes without saying, and I mean, you can correct me if you don't agree, Tom Brewster, but there are these two pillars in board game YouTube, and it's the dice tower and shut up and sit down. And the only reason I list those two specifically is because they are very different approaches to talking about board gaming that have been around for a very long time.
Sure.
I don't think I'm too out with what I'm saying.
No, for the longest time, the site was very concerned about where we stood in relation to the dice tower. Like, we are the two. I think now Watch It Played is really rocketing up as well, which is great.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a very different approach too. Yeah,
it is. But I think they also do a really good job of like. I think that what Rodney does makes games so much more accessible to people. So I think it's really I think that's very valid as a way of getting people into the hobby, which is kind of what we're all about fundamentally.
As far as criticism though, I feel like the comparisons are always like, oh, this is kind of like Shut Up and Sit Down, or this is kind of like the Dice Tower, because those are the ones that just have been around, that have stood around. The interesting thing is, whereas I see a lot of the parallels in the Dice Tower, which are very consistent in terms of who's creating the kind of content, right? Maybe there might be a different personality around it or a different format, but the ultimate goal is like you establish what you're talking about, you talk about what the pros and cons are, and then sometimes you provide some kind of score rating. The interesting thing is that everything that's outside of that, basically anything that's an outlier, immediately gets categorized as like shut up and sit down kinds of content, which I would argue that space is much more varied. Like if you're looking at No Pun Included, or you're looking at even like a lot of podcasting, right? Like So Very Wrong About Games, or like Dan Thoreau's articles. Like I don't think any of those things are similar to Shut Up and Sit Down. Like maybe No Pun Included, but even that is pretty varied. I think there's a lot more depth and a lot more variation, but somehow that gets grouped together simply because the other category is just so big.
It's and so well established as well as like the kind of standard board game review is kind of like set up to be this very like, I think that's like owes a lot to Shut Up and Sit Down's early success, is owed to the fact that it was trying to make it relatively approachable for people who were like into video games but weren't into the hobby. Whereas I think that the Dice Towers content and that kind of whole sphere of board game criticism, board game media is entirely centered around providing for people who are already into games.
Yeah.
I'm glad that it is out there. I'm glad that they're like the Dice Tower putting out a video on basically every single new release that comes out is incredibly useful to the industry as a whole. Like, it's good that there is like, you know, video documentation of all of these games out there, and I think that's a valuable service. But I also think that at the same time, it's kind of dangerous catering content to the people, catering your content, people who are already like put within the industry and they're already like just paying to like buy something. Yeah. I think it's more interesting to try and get more people into the hobby, and from there I think we will get a more interesting hobby scene broadly.
Mm-hmm. It's nice that they're there as it's almost like a baseline of quality and sort of like reference, I suppose, right?
I saw a comment ages ago that was saying something to the tune of like, oh, I've been following Shut Up and Sit Down from the very start, ever since Paul and Quinn's were hopped up on Dice Tower top 10 lists. And I think there is like a case to be made that they kind of started Shut Up and Sit Down in a way, because that was the content that Paul and Quinn's consumed when they started the site, was kind of like watching Dice Tower stuff and then putting their like spin on it in a weird way.
Right.
One could say it was an innovation upon a pre-established format or something, or an iteration. Yeah.
Well, yeah, let's go back into that, because I think the two bleed into each other. And maybe we pivot to some more like game related topics so that we can
pivot away.
We can meet our quota in terms of talking about actual board games.
We need to stop talking about game content creation, which is what you do, and we need to start talking about games themselves, because that's what game content creation is, I think.
Let's start at a very specific example, Terra Mystica. So Terra Mystica is, in my mind, the definition of iteration. I guess I bring this one up because I don't know how I feel about it. Terra Mystica, a lot of people would argue Gaia Project is almost the same game, just with a different theme and a few rules tweaks. And then Age of Innovation is almost the same game with a different theme and a few rules tweaks. And then Terra Nova is literally just Terra Mystica, but simplified.
Yep.
I think this is a clear example of iteration. Where I'm confused is like, is this good iteration? Is this bad iteration? Or how does one determine that? Because on one hand, it allows you to provide something that you know people like in a new way that's slightly different or interesting. On the other hand, it's like, am I just playing or, purchasing the same game a second time? I don't know.
There's definitely like a frustration with people grabbing something like Age of Innovation or Gaia Project, or you've played a good chunk of Terra Mystica. I fall into this all the time of like being excited about some new version of some game despite having not really plumbed the depths of the original.
Right.
And I think that's what this podcast is obviously trying to do, is to like look at games that are a little older and to try and search for that kind of like depth and nuance within them in an industry that is kind of constantly about like, well, what's the new thing? What's the exciting thing? Which we are, 100% a part of as a channel. Like, we are always focused on what is the new exciting thing, and like, should you put it in your shopping basket? Rarely do we actually really take the time to like sit with a game for a long time, because it's not conducive to the way that you need to make content.
Which is why you're on the show, is to atone for that behavior.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm flagellating myself.
This is why you chose to suffer through this. Yeah.
Through this ordeal. I think that Terra Mystica is like a lot of Age of Innovation and Terra Nova are really interesting examples, because it's literally like Terra Mystica with the complexity dialed up a little bit, and then like the complexity dialed down a little bit. And it's kind of trying to get more of a catchment of like, what kind of Terra Mystica head are you? It's trying to cover like more bases. Whereas those kind of like lateral moves, I've not played Gaia Project, so I can't speak on this too much. But like, from what I understand, Gaia Project is sort of considered like a horizontal move to Terra Mystica. It's more just like, do you click with space or do you click with elves as a concept?
To assuage the haters, I think there is a little bit of a difference between Terra Mystica and Gaia Project, but I mean, it's negligible, right? Outside of the theme.
Well, I'll disagree with you, Kenny. I'll be the devil's advocate.
You think the tech tree does enough?
Well, I think the biggest thing about Gaia Project that reformats the game is the fact that it is a fully variable setup, whereas Terra Mystica has this locked-in board. There's always the same map that you play on.
Okay, but again, I think that's a negligible difference, but we can disagree. That's fine.
But I feel like you can't say it's negligible because it's almost like when you play chess, there's opening sequences that are almost always kind of the correct move to do. And that's, as I understand, Terra Mystica has a similar feeling. But because of the
openings.
Yeah, exactly. There's an opening. And Gaia Project makes that nearly impossible to really hone in on.
I think where I land on them is they're not offensive iterations. I think there's enough there, but it's not as pronounced as other iterations that I would be more excited about.
As an example?
Like Uwe Rosenberg's games, for example. I know I like to say that he always makes the same game, but I have to give Uwe credit. When I'm playing a new Uwe agriculture game, I am still delighted by it and interested in unraveling its workings. So it's just familiar enough, whereas like when I play Gaia Project, I didn't feel like I was like, ooh, it's in space now, you know? Like it's with Uwe, at least it's like, oh, we've got this pit with these old men in it, and when you throw them fish, if they eat 3 fish, they poop out another fish. You know, it's like, that's different. It feels different from playing Le Havre or something. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
I'm still reeling from the old man pooping out the fish.
Oh, yeah, there's a whole headcanon.
I'm trying to recover from that bit of mental imagery.
Yeah, sorry.
Kenny ruins Newsfjord for Tom Brewster. That's the title of this episode now.
Yeah, it's like, you know the scene in Silence of the Lambs with like it puts the lotion on the skin? But just imagine it's like 6 or so old men in the pit. And just once in a while, they're like, please, I'm hungry. And then you're like, what are you going to do for me? And then you like throw them a fish down there.
It's haunting. I kind of want to play all games like this with this dark, messed up headcanon for what the hell is going on in them. If they canonize that, do you think you'd like it more or less?
I like the cuteness of it not being official.
Yeah. But in your head, you know what's really happening.
I know what's really happening.
I'm realizing just now, Kenny does this quite a bit where he invents his own psychotic jigsaw-esque like canon for any given game. He'll be like, I read the rules and I
disagree with
rather than tell you guys what the theme was that the designer came up with, here's my ideas. And it's always something.
It's something for sure. Yeah.
It sounds horrifying.
I don't know why. It feels different.
No, I can see that. And I think that's also like, there's an element of truth to the fact that like his career is kind of like a one long iteration in a weird way. And they're not necessarily iterations to make one kind of like Uwe Rosenberg game, like the sort of ultimate apex of his craft. They're all like sort of slightly like sideways, quite safe movements across time.
Right.
Like every game is like doing like, what if it was a farming game, but, you know, and they add this like little, you know, mechanism, or they toy with this sort of one idea. And I think that kind of lends the games this kind of safe pair of hands feeling, because you feel like what they are adding, what they are changing feels quite well considered, because they're not changing like tons at a time.
Yeah, I think that's an epiphany moment for me, what you just said. It's the well-considered aspect.
It feels like there's an idea that like a lot of the game is kind of bolted down in one way, and so when they are introducing something new, you are kind of like savoring the implications of that thing on the rest of the game. Whereas if you were playing something that is an entirely new set of mechanics, you might not engage with that as much. And I think like that's kind of like the secret of why people go cuckoo bananas for Knizia design, is because they are simplifications of a lot of their mechanics, and they're trying to make you like pay more attention to what is happening in the game rather than waterboarding you with kind of excess. That's definitely a trend in like Eurogame design recently, is like if they have enough mechanics stacked in the box, you feel like you're making clever moves and you're like puzzling out something in a really efficient way. But deep down, are you actually engaging with those mechanics as much as you might be if there was only like 3 or 4 of them total in the game?
Yeah.
It's like Arc Nova.
So Very Wrong About Games calls this whole thing the system mastery. The complexity comes from understanding the systems, not necessarily how to navigate the gameplay itself.
Yes. I think that is so true, is that like we played Daitoshi recently, which is like a big chunky Devere game, and it's like as a game it felt very much like all of my brain power was being used on understanding the procedure of the game rather than the implications of the moves that I was making, which in a way can kind of be like, it can be a different kind of fun. I don't think it's completely invalid as something that is enjoyable, but I think that the kind of interaction that I prioritize is the kind that is like barbed and pointed and intentional. I've been playing a lot of sorry, I'm breaking the rules of your podcast by talking about recent games.
You just say new game alert.
Yeah.
New game alert. I've been playing a whole bunch of the old King's Crown, which is this kind of like head-to-head lane battler type game. It's sort of like Condottiere or Schottentotten if it was on like absolute steroids. I won't explain it too much, but there's something about that game that the more I've played it, the more I've realized that you can really like, so much of the information is visible to you that you can really like game out the specifics, and the sense of satisfaction gained from that versus something where I'm kind of just like playing opposite an opponent who's doing something, but I don't really know what. It's a palpable difference.
Yeah.
And I think that's what, going back to the topic at hand, I think that's what like the best Rosenberg or Knizia designs do, is they kind of like focus you around quite a simple core system, and you're not focusing on understanding the game, you're focusing on what the player across from you is intending and what they're doing.
I agree. And I would even go further and say that when they iterate upon designs, they're focusing on a specific system that they're iterating, and they're very deliberate about how they're approaching it.
I want to make sure I understood what you were saying about Old King's Crown.
As a game, Old King's Crown made me realize that I've been playing a lot of games where I've been focusing on just understanding what my engine does. Something like Old King's Crown is kind of refocusing where your interest is. It is like continually on exactly what your opponent is doing. And that's what's so weird about that game, is it looks like huge and bonkers and it has loads of stuff going on, because it does have like a lot of like fringe, weird asymmetries and particular interactions. But when you like cut that stuff away, fundamentally what you're really focusing on is like, what number do they have in their hand? And you can track that information and it's like made quite available to you. You can game everything out and things don't come as like a big surprise of like, oh, like me and Matt will often have turns in Euro games where I'll be like head down looking at my board and I'll be like, right, I think I get like 12 points. And Matt will go, sure. And I'm like, yeah, I think that's what I get because I've done the maths, and he just trusts me that that's what I've done. And I think increasingly I'm finding that like school of design to be like less rewarding over time because it feels more in that camp of like parallel play, which has a place.
Sure. Otherwise, Uwe Rosenberg would be out of a job almost.
It's very true. That's very true.
This is reminding me of another new game alert, though, is Rebel Princess.
Sure.
I think I have something I can sort of add to this conversation. Have you played it?
Yeah, I really like it.
And I'm not going to say that my final thoughts are out on this game, but just the first iteration, we got hit with like a rules card in the center where the combination of that rules card, in addition to what you're trying to do in the game, made my play feel very on rails, which to me sort of defeated the appeal of trick taking to begin with.
Yeah.
It makes me think that there's a lot of designs that might be coming out now that are going to fall into that sort of pit where they've added so much that they've actually sort of defeated the value of the core system that they started with. And I'm not sure that Rebel Princess is actually doing that. It just it gave me that realization that like it could just, you know, it ends up defeating itself as a play experience because I don't even have that much agency left when you consider all of the rules I have to follow.
I think that's a really, like, it is a really good example, because I think that it is, like, that is 100% the case that I find with, like, a lot of modern trick-taking games. Like, they're constantly coming out with new, exciting twists on the trick-taking genre. It's great that all of these games are out there, but increasingly I'm playing a lot of them, and I feel like there are just a lot of bells and whistles added on, and then I feel like my play is getting increasingly unmotivated.
Yeah.
And I can definitely see that happening in Rebel Princess. Like, as a game, it is trying to pile on, like, wacky stuff that is happening within the trick-taking game. The appeal of those games, to me, is not this, like, collector's attitude that people have towards trick-takers, which is like, oh, I'm going to hoover up every new trick-taker, and I'm going to bring them to game night, and I'm going to say, hey, have you played this cool new trick-taker? It does this weird thing. I like sitting with one of them for, like, a long time and kind of seeing how play evolves and how you find the weird little pockets of nuance. Not technically trick-taking, but I played a whole bunch of Teach You. I love Teach You. It's probably my single favourite card game. And we played a bunch of it, like, on holiday. It was a delight. But one of my game designer friends messaged me and was like, hey, I'm reading the rules to Teach You, and I don't really understand it. Like, why is it good? And I tried to explain to the best of my ability why it was enjoyable. And he was like, okay, we'll think on it more. And then he sent me a message later on and was like, I'm playing it now with 4 hands, and I don't really see why it's fun. It just felt like he was trying to, like, understand something that fundamentally you can only understand by, like, playing it with one group over and over again, whereas he was sat at a table, like, trying to find the fun in the, like, raw mechanics. And increasingly, I find that way with trick takers, that they're expressed as being, like, fun or interesting because they have a weird twist, when really what I'm looking for is, like, in one of those games when someone does something, and to use the parlance of the youth, when everyone pogs out. That's what I'm looking for.
That's for your siblings listening at home.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they will be listening.
Yeah. To tie it back to kind of this iteration being safer aspect, I think that's also why designers gravitate towards iterating. It's also because the familiarity will allow you to A, internalize rules, but B, understand the flow or the intent behind something. If we go to that Teach You example,
sure.
Teach You is innovative in the sense that, like, it's not playing like a lot of other games. And if you haven't experienced it, even if you've experienced shedding and trick-taking games, like, you might not get the vibe that it's going for unless you play with seasoned players. If I'm a designer, I'm sitting here and I'm like, I want to come up with this game, and it's really unique. It's wild, but it only works in my head or when I sit at a table with it. The publishers aren't going to do that a lot of times. They're not going to sit with you and get there. They're going to read the rules and be like, I don't know what the heck this is, and move on. Yeah. And I think that's motivating a lot of this safety as well. It's like understood mechanisms or understood contracts in terms of how games play out. They are familiar to the people that you're pitching them to, and so they're going to be more likely to be taken up. They're also more likely to be seen as successful. Like, I'm sure there are cases where it's like, this game is amazing, but I don't think it'll sell, and that's part of the reason they don't get made too.
And it's also because I think the infrastructure that people have to play the games is already kind of pre-established. Yeah. Like, people have game groups that are like, 4 people sitting around a table expecting a certain thing, trying to get the group together for, like, a weird curveball. And like something like Blood in the Clock Tower, right? I think that game is tremendously innovative and interesting, and I love it to pieces. But when the review went out for the game, people didn't really understand why or how it was innovative, and I don't think a lot of people got a chance to find that out, because fundamentally a lot of folks' game group is, people looking to play a Euro game or like a sort of, a board game-ass board game. Yeah. I'm also guilty of this, right? Because in the cupboard, literally to my left, where I keep all the in-tray of games, I've got Werewolf in the Dark, which is, as you'd expect. It's just Werewolf, but you play it in the dark. And it, like, reading the rules, it was like leaping out at me at being like a really fun, imaginative, strange experience, and I can't wait to play it. But getting the people together for that already makes it kind of a little bit of a non-starter in a strange way. Yeah. So you are always working with the restriction of like, well, what can you do with cardboard and 4 people?
We've talked a lot about iteration, both the pros and the cons, and innovation. We've definitely implied a lot of the benefits, right? Are there downsides? I was thinking about board gaming. I can't really think of any designers that like went in a completely different direction, but it fell flat or something like that. But what I like to do is I like to equate what's happening culturally in board gaming to other media. For me, the one I'm most familiar with is music. And there's definitely been cases of artists that come out with an excellent first album. And then either they face this like the curse of the second album, right? The sophomore album of like, either they make something that's just way too familiar and derivative of their first work, or they go in a completely different direction. And sometimes that direction is amazing, and sometimes it's really not the vibe, you know? Like, I can't think of that in board gaming, but I guess knowing how things go in music, if that became more encouraged, I'm sure we would see cases of that, and maybe that's what people are avoiding. Who's the most innovative designer? Who goes out of their comfort zone the most?
It's funny because like the thing that jumps out, like having recently played City of Six Moons, is Annabelle Holland. But it's kind of funny because I think a lot of Annabelle's designs are kind of in her comfort zone in the sense that they're all kind of like deliberately a little off kilter.
Yeah, they're all outside of
like,
the norm. That's the common theme.
The strangest thing that she could do at the moment would be like to make a worker placement, you know, barley-based farming game or something like that, right?
I think of like Friedman Freeze, but also Friedman Freeze is in a similar category as Amabel, where Friedman Freeze just does weird stuff. There's like a core conceit that he explores that hasn't been done before and then builds a game around it. The one I have written here is Vlada. He's the only example I can really think of that just like stays within the confines of what isn't too wild. Problem with Vlada is all his games are good. So it's not a good example of like going into bad territory. Like he didn't like try to make this thing and it sucked, you know?
I guess you can just definitely see like where some of those games, like I guess if you're looking at the run of like Through the Ages into Galaxy Trucker, I can imagine that like a lot of people who are enticed by the former are like kind of horrified by the latter. Like there are people who I've played Galaxy Trucker with who have just found it, like they just hate it universally. I feel like broadly designers, like they find, like if you want to make a career out of it, certainly it's about like finding that niche and then like finding your slot and just filling that. Like John D. Clare is a great example. John D. Clare makes like very solid, dependable games that actually do a fair amount of like different stuff. They'll sometimes like pick up ideas that he's had before and iterate upon them. But broadly, they're like, he's a safe pair of hands in the same way that someone like an Uwe would be. Right. If you're doing something truly outside the box, it just comes with such a like, it is a niche hobby. Finding a niche within a niche like that comes with a lot of risk, especially in the tariff era of games.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
The tariff era. That's what we're going to call it. Yeah.
It's rough.
Cool. Yeah. That's age 12 in innovation. Or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
To tie out the innovation, I don't know what it means that we don't have examples of designers going completely into left field and getting punished. Part of it is because this just doesn't happen. Designers tend to stay in areas that are safe or familiar. Part of it is also maybe research. Maybe I'm going to get a message on the Discord that's like, oh, why did you talk about blah, blah, blah? That was a complete flop. And it's like, I probably didn't know. It could also be just that innovation is generally well regarded when it comes to designs right now. I feel like the space is open enough that you as a designer, if you are willing to take that risk, I don't think there's much historicity so far of like that risk being punished. I think having the chops, having the fundamentals is really more important than having an idea that's going to resonate with people. I think that's reassuring, to be honest. Not to gush over Cole Wehrle, but like Cole tends to take some very bold directions with each game. Yeah, there's definitely some of the same DNA across them, but nobody would try to say that Molly House is like Root. And I think his willingness to go in those directions, plus the fact that he has the chops, right? The level of clarity as well as understanding of fundamentals allows him to execute on these different concepts. And that's more valuable than whether or not your idea is going to land, right? There's a world in which somebody made a game like Molly House, but it wasn't good. A world where somebody made a game like Arcs, but it wasn't good. But because of the person making it, that's what makes it better, in my opinion.
That's definitely true. But I also think there's a critical sphere around Cole that will like appraise his game slightly differently than they might if he didn't have his name on the box.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
But then at the same time, I think that like I want to be part of like a critical sphere that is able to look at games from designers. Like I don't want designers to feel afeard of like pushing new ground with their designs or treading new water because there isn't an analogy to it that currently exists in the space.
Yep.
I think that's like where the critical sphere needs to pick up the slack, is being more able to engage with new ideas as the designer intended. One of my favorite things nowadays is when a rulebook, Bitewing Games do this a lot, and I wish more publishers would do it, where they have like almost design notes on the back cover of the manual, and I love it. I love it so much because I think it allows a kind of like lovingly a quite stunted critical sphere, including myself in that 100%, to be able to like to engage with the intention behind a game, to have that kind of like immediately put front and center rather than trying to have to divine it from the raw mechanics.
It's part
themselves.
of the experience.
I don't begrudge Mollyhouse for not having this, but like I'd be fascinated if a game would have like a why did we use roll and move in the sort of liner notes for the game, right? I think that stuff is so fascinating to me, and I think there is like motivation behind it. I think it creates a compelling game, but I think for a lot of people they'll just be like, they'll look at that mechanic and immediately kind of like drop it straight away from their mind because they've decided they don't gel with that. And that's where I think that the critical sphere can really improve, is to be more receptive to innovation in that way.
We talked about La Granja recently on the podcast, and one of the things I love about La Granja is in the back of the rule book it says, this thing was inspired by this designer or this game, and this other aspect came after we had worked on it's not even designer notes, but I think they were able to compromise where, okay, we're not going to get a full sheet of what the design process was like, but here's a very quick, almost like accreditation to the different aspects that influence the game. There is no reason you shouldn't be able to find space for a 3-inch by 3-inch paragraph in the rulebook that kind of talks about this was from this was from this. And it gives so much insight that you can kind of fill in the blanks based on that and be like, oh, okay, I see where they went. It's also super nice when you're like a snooty board game enjoyer and you're like, oh, this reminds me of this mechanic. And then you go to the back of the rule book and it confirms that and you go, see, knew it.
And that's all that we're there for deep down. That's all that anyone wants.
That's all I want to know, is that I'm very smart, as we have prefaced at the beginning of the podcast.
It's a big brain podcast. Exactly. A big brain podcast.
It sounds like the moral of the episode, because we always have a moral. We like to end on that. Write our letter to Princess
Peach.
What's her name? Fuck shit. I'm totally screwing up my brony cred here. Oh my god. Princess Celestia. Our letter to her today is, don't judge a game by its mechanics.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm into that.
Yeah. Judge it by how it made you feel about those motherfuckers you sat at the table with for 3 hours.
Yeah. Fire. They were spitting with this
now,
one.
Why your game of Monopoly deal took 3 hours? That's another can of worms that we're gonna have to unpack.
But yeah, I think we got there. So that's gonna do it for this week. Thanks so much for everyone who came in and listened to this. Thank you, especially Tom Brewster, for showing up to the show. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me on the Cool Board Game Podcast. Ooh. It was good fun.
Want to give a thank you to Michael, Tyler, Devin, and Josh of the Boise Rainbows for the segue music that we only use on other episodes. And thank you especially to Bonehouse for letting us use your song Rot as our opening theme.
Tom Brewster, where can people find you? What are you working on?
You can find me on Shut Up and Sit Down, YouTube channel, website, etc. I make videos. They are fun to watch with your eyes. You can watch the video on innovation that should be out like this week if all goes to plan. If it isn't out soon after this podcast goes live, then I've had a breakdown. And so you can enjoy that knowledge on your own.
I love the idea that there's somebody listening to this that's like, this Tom Brewster sounds pretty funny, pretty good. I should check out Shut Up and Sit Down. I've never heard of that before. It's like such a weird concept. Maybe my mom or something. I don't know. If you're loving the cast, share it with a friend or on Reddit or on BGG. You can also reach out to us directly at shelfstablecast@gmail.com. All of this and more available in the show notes. If you like what we're doing and want to make more of it happen, consider subscribing to us on Patreon. You'll get access to bonus content and Discord. Normally, we ask what topic we want to do next time, but I believe that we're doing the mid-year resolution check-in that is much needed for Tom Bowers.
The audible where I have to apologize to our listeners for not having completed 50 games of Brass Lancashire.
50?
Well, because I had to hit 100 for the whole year. That was the goal.
Oh my God.
But we're nowhere close. You can imagine.
So yeah, look forward to that. That's not the only thing we'll talk about, but we'll do some general check-ins with the fans, check-ins on how the show's going and things like that. So it should be fun. Tom Brewster, it was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me on. It's been good fun. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.